Good morning, Member Gurin.
Good morning.
I can see you. I can hear you.
Excellent.
My job is done. Welcome.
Got to do those audio tests.
Yeah, exactly. And Member Robinson and Chair Stokesbury.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, it's 10 o'clock, but I think we might still be waiting on a couple people. I know that our quorum today to conduct business, which wasn't much more
Recording
than
in progress.
approving minutes, was in doubt, but I will give it another moment or two to see if we have any other late arrivals.
Mr. Chair, the current count is 6.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, we're now at 7 people or 7 members.
Okay, and I just noticed, Aaron, I don't think I ever replied to the email about checking for quorum, so I don't know if I was included in your count or not, but I'm here.
That's as of right now, not the RSVPs, but as of right now, including yourself, 7 members total.
Okay. All right, folks. As I mentioned a minute ago, it looks like we might not be able to have a quorum today. Luckily, we didn't really have a lot of business other than approving the minutes. So we will skip over that item and potentially come back to it if enough members to constitute a quorum do arrive. And then we will, right at 10:05, right on time, move to the Office of State Actuary update from our state actuary, Matt Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Matt Smith. I'm the state actuary. I think Beth's going to load the presentation here momentarily. I have a very short presentation for you today, updating you on the Office of the State Actuary. Next slide, Beth, please. So I'm going to touch on operations at the office, our office performance, and major projects for this year, and certainly happy to answer your questions about the office. So turning to the next slide. On operations, so on the 12th of this month, the physical office reopened, subject to safety protocols. The office remains closed to the public and guests unless an appointment is scheduled in advance and approved. We're continuing to offer the telework option. It's very popular with our team and well utilized. Two recruitments that we put on hold during 2020 because of some of the uncertainty with COVID and future budgets are going to resume in the current biennium. And we have one recruitment for an entry-level actuarial position that we will be pursuing soon, and another information services position that's to be determined. We're still defining that position. We're also continuing to do some excellent work in our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. We've had some very successful optional internal discussion forums at the office that are staff led and staff facilitated. We adopted a DEI statement that's on our website. Encourage you to take a look at that if you're interested. And we're going to have some ongoing training this biennium as well. And then lastly, just wanted to touch on the budget. Very, very thankful and grateful that our current budget is adequate for our expected services this biennium. Now, transition to a couple of slides on office performance. Every 2 years, we publish a report on our office performance. We just did that earlier this year. The full report is in your meeting materials. So I'm just going to touch on some of the highlights today. I apologize, there's a lot of information on this slide. The next bullet just sort of puts things in context. What is our sort of overarching mission here? You see us primarily in the pension space through this committee, but we support the security of public benefit programs, including state pension and medical plans, the prepaid tuition program, or you might know it as the GET program, and most recently, we're the actuary for the WA Cares program, which is the state's new long-term care program. The next couple of bullets just provide some financial context. Excluding the WA Cares program, these programs that I've mentioned have a present value of future benefits for current members of about $140 billion. When you look at just the pension systems and you look at the future value of pension payments that we expect for current members, that's $770 billion. And the WA Cares program, based on our latest measurements, that's about $172 billion in expected future payments for that program over the 75-year period from 2022 to 2096. On the next slide, I'll just touch on, Beth, if you could advance the next slide. Thank you, slide 4. When we're looking at our office performance, we evaluate ourselves across some objective performance measures and goals in the areas of fiscal notes, actuarial evaluation reports, financial management, human resources, and client satisfaction. So the office did meet all the performance goals for 2020 with 2 exceptions. We just fell short of our training goal, the amount of money we wanted to spend on training under the human resources category. I'm sure that had a lot to do with the impact of COVID. We didn't do as much training, although virtual training options were available. And there was one material error that was identified in the outside actuarial audit of our last actuarial evaluation report. Of course, our goal is to never make any mistakes. That particular evaluation, we had to update all the assumptions from our demographic experience study. So hundreds of assumptions that needed to be updated in our valuation software. And we unfortunately missed one in that update, but very grateful for the audit and the ability to correct that, that item before the Pension Funding Council adopted contribution rates. And on the next slide, just wanted to touch on the major projects for the office this calendar year. And I'm highlighting the projects that are outside of our normal recurring annual work. It's a big year of experience studies for us. That's where we evaluate our assumptions, compare them to actual experience, see if we need to make any updates to keep the assumptions reasonable. So we just concluded an experience study for the GET program for the volunteer firefighters pension system. And we're putting the finishing details on an experience study for the supplemental retirement plans that are offered in higher education. For the WACARES Fund, later this year, we'll issue our second annual OSA solvency report. And we're currently working with the Commission on the development of a risk management framework. For statutory projects, these are pension projects. There are two that I wanted to note: the report on financial condition and the recommendation on long-term economic assumptions. It's my understanding that you'll receive a briefing on these items at your September meeting. For the risk assessment, this is something that we do every year, but every 6 years we perform a risk assessment assumption study, just updating and reviewing the assumptions that we use in the risk assessment. We're going to begin that project in late 2021 this year, and we'll wrap it up in 2022. And lastly, just wanted to touch on some investments in the area of IT. We are continuing a pretty large IT project with the assistance of the LegTech, the legislature's IT professionals. We're migrating our actuarial databases from SAS to SQL. Significant project that's been spanning a couple of years. And with that, Mr. Chair, concludes my prepared remarks. Happy to answer any questions that members have on the office.
Thanks, Matt. No questions for me, so I'm going to give it a second to see if any of the committee members had a question.
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Pat.
Yes, Matt, I was just curious. It doesn't have to do with the presentation, but I talked to a volunteer firefighter yesterday. These people are obviously very active in Eastern Washington today and will be for the next several months. Who governs that program? Is that something that the Select Committee governs, or is that a separate system?
Great question. There's a separate board that oversees that program, and it's outside the jurisdiction of the Select Committee. Occasionally there might be some updates that you might receive on that program, but they have their own separate board.
Okay, thank you very much.
And any other members with questions for our state actuary, Matt Smith? Matt, I don't see anybody, so you're off the hook. Thank you. Thanks for the update. The next item on the agenda is agenda item number 3, a deferred compensation overview, and we'll hear from a couple folks, but I think first Aaron is going to give a brief introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, it will be a very brief introduction. For the record, Aaron Gutierrez, committee staff. Normally, this is the type of presentation that the committee staff would give. The reason I wanted to give you a quick the quick intro is to note that fact. But under the circumstances, since what the committee had asked for was specifically an update in how of how these two agencies are administering new programs, it made the most sense to go directly to the source. So if the committee decides to move any items forward or turn these into an issue to be studied, the Select Committee staff will take it back again and take the lead in facilitating that. But for today, we'll have presentations both from DRS staff and SIB staff. With that in mind, thank you for that, and I'll hand it over to Seth.
Thanks, Aaron. So I just want to confirm that folks can see my screen. Great, I see some heads nodding, so yeah. Thank you. My name is Seth Miller. I'm the Retirement Readiness Director at the Department of Retirement Systems. And as Aaron mentioned at the last committee meeting, some folks asked questions regarding the deferred compensation program, the optional retirement savings plan that the state offers. So we're sharing this presentation with the State Investment Board, who's going to provide some additional detail about a specific initiative that's happening this year. But I'm going to provide an overview of the deferred compensation program. I know some folks on the committee are very familiar with this. Some folks know nothing about it. So we'll start off with a little bit of an overview of the program in general. And then talk about the auto enrollment program that started in 2017, which was the last big initiative that's happened with the deferred compensation program that I know a few folks on the committee are very familiar with. I'll pause after that for questions since it's sort of two separate presentations jammed together. And then we'll talk about a Roth option within the 457 plan. So. First, just an overview of the deferred compensation program. It is an optional retirement savings vehicle that's offered by the state. It's a 457 plan, so you may be familiar with a 401k plan or 403b plan, just different IRS letters, numbers jammed together. So different types of plans have different rules. This is a program that can be 457 plans can be offered by governmental employers. All state agencies participate in the state's DCP plan, and some local governments participate in our plan, but some local governments offer their own plan or that provide multiple vendors or have slightly different options or flavors of 457 plans. We're not necessarily in competition with those plans. There might be very legitimate reasons why a city or a county may want to offer their own plan if they offer matching funds or something like that. The administration may be easier for them to handle on their own. But we do offer for many local governments. It's oftentimes easier for them to work through the state plan as well. A question that oftentimes comes up from folks is, what can I invest in if I participate in deferred comp? The Washington State Investment Board selects the investment options very similar to the investment options for a Plan 3 member. And I know this committee is very familiar with Plan 3 members. There's about 20 different funds that people can invest in. The bulk of those are target date funds, and we'll talk, the State Investment Board will talk a little bit more about target date funds during their presentation, but those are funds that are based on your age and future retirement date. And then there are individual funds that are like mutual funds that a person can choose a small cap or large cap or bond fund if they prefer to do their own mixing and matching. We sometimes get questions from folks who want to invest in gold, or they want to buy GameStop, or they want to get Bitcoin. Those are not we don't currently offer a brokerage account. It is something that you look at occasionally, and it may be a reason that some other plans offer their own, or some other governmental entities offer their own 457 plan if they have a vocal group of folks who want to do individual stock picking. That might be something that they offer, but currently we as a state do not offer individual brokerage accounts. So the Department of Retirement Systems is responsible for the administration of the deferred comp plan, and there are a number of different administrative decisions that DRS has to make over time. Those sorts of things include who is the record keeper for our plan, the fee structure. This is another question that comes up from participants occasionally, is our fee structure is based on the assets that they have in the plan, so a percentage of that is paid in fees. Some other plans may offer fees that are a set dollar amount that you have to pay $7 a quarter and then a smaller percentage. the fee structure is really determined by the administrator of the plan. Other things that could be administrative options would be things like loans within a plan. Currently, deferred comp does not offer any loans, but some plans do offer loans. Usually, these optional provisions are provided through federal legislation. So for folks on the committee who are really retirement geeks, you might be familiar with the Secure Act. Was a recent federal legislation that did a bunch of different things associated with retirement, but it provided some optional retirement provisions. So for DCP, one of the optional things that we adopted is that folks who recently had a child or have done an adoption have the ability to take a small amount out of their deferred comp account to help cover those costs. So there's possibly future federal legislation that'll change or add additional options, and so that's something to consider. And then another option that's up to the plan administrators is whether or not they offer a Roth option within the plan, and we'll talk much more in depth about that later in the presentation. So that's the general overview of deferred comp. One thing I wanted the committee to be aware of is what the growth of the deferred comp program looks like over the last 10 years or so. So this graph comes from our annual financial report. And you'll see over the last 4 years or so, there's been a dramatic increase in the number of people who are participating in deferred comp. And this is really because of the auto enrollment program. Prior to 2017, DRS did a lot of work in marketing deferred comp, trying to get more people to sign up, adding features and things like that, and really didn't move the needle a lot, just to be completely blunt. Folks would sign up when they're ready to sign up, but most people want to save more for retirement. And the best thing to remove barriers for people to participate in deferred comp is to auto-enroll them. And so in 2017, all new state employees and all new higher education employees have been automatically enrolled into the deferred compensation program. This was a bill that I know had been discussed at different times in the select committee. Former Senator Bailey was the sponsor of the bill. Representative Vandeweghe, now Senator Vandeweghe, was a big champion of the bill as well. Really want to thank both of them for the work to make this happen, because it's had a huge impact on the number of people who are saving more for retirement. So just some basics about auto enrollment into deferred comp. So new employees automatically have 3% of their salary put into their deferred comp, and their retirement fund, the investments that are selected are the target date fund that is appropriate for their age. At any point, a person can change their deferral, or they can change their investment. So if they decide that they want to have less going in, or they want to stop their deferrals, they can do that. If they want to change their investment mix, they can do that. But the default is that they automatically are participating at 3%, and that they're automatically in the target date fund. And if a person chooses not to participate, and they've had 1 or 2 contributions come out, they can get those refunded to them as long as they're within that 90-day window. So I've got a couple of charts here that show how big of an impact this has had on new state employees. So prior to auto enrollment, we used to track how many new state employees would participate in, or who would sign up for deferred comp within their first 90 days of employment. And if you think back on your first couple of months in any new job, you get a ton of paperwork. And the paperwork that is given to you that is most important is usually always healthcare. What am I going to sign up for? What are my insurance options? And then whatever other required things, tax forms that you fill out, your retirement choices. If you're a governmental employee, you're choosing between Plan 2 and Plan 3. Those things are required. Deferred comp is an optional program. And so prior to auto enrollment, if you get a new form, you're just going, oh, well, that's optional. I set it to the side. I'd like to save for retirement. Maybe I'll do that. Prior to auto enrollment, only about 3 or 4% of people were signing up for deferred compensation right when they started employment. you can see the scale on the graph there only goes to 10%. We were really hoping that we would get 5% of new people to sign up for deferred compensation. But since auto enrollment, you'll see that the graph completely changes. And now, since auto enrollment, we're getting about 90% of people, new state employees. Yeah, that's significant. I saw some eyes pop up on the screen. That's exactly the reaction. The scale on the graph has completely changed here. So about 90% of people are sticking with deferred compensation. And one of the facts is that we've really diving into this data that I think is just fascinating is that more people now are increasing their deferral above 3% than previously were even enrolling in deferred compensation. So once again, that speaks to once you're in the plan, we've removed a lot of the barriers. Then it's just one click to change your deferral. Whereas if you have to sign up for a program, you have to fill out your name and your social security, you have to pick your investments, you have to pick your contribution rate. There's a lot of decisions you have to make. And no matter how simple you make that process, it's still human nature to not take that action, even though people want to, even though most people say they want to participate in optional savings plans. So auto enrollment's had a huge impact. Like I said, about 90% of the people are staying in the plan. And prior to auto enrollment, the average age of people in DCP was 47 years old. And this makes sense. People are usually thinking about retirement as they're getting closer to it. They start to get a little nervous. They want to put more money away for retirement. What additional savings vehicles do I have? So people start saving. So just in the last 4 years, the average age of people in the deferred compensation program has gone from 47 to 42. And why that's important is the power of compound interest. The longer you're saving for retirement, the better outcomes you're going to have, the more time is on your side to let those investments grow. There's really great graphs if you want to like geek out on this sort of thing. Like people who start saving at 25 for their retirement can oftentimes stop saving at 35, and they're ahead of people who started saving at 45. When they get to age 65, because of that saving early is really important. And that's one of the huge advantages of auto enrollment is it gets people in the program earlier. So one last thing I'd like to just mention about auto enrollment, there's lots of myths out there about why this might not be a good thing. Seems paternalistic. It's forcing people to save for their retirement. But one of the things that we oftentimes heard is that people lower down on the income scale wouldn't participate because they couldn't afford to have 3% come out of their check or 5%. They couldn't have this additional percentage come out of our check. And what our data is showing, and this matches up with the national data as well and research that's been done, is that people on the lower income scale actually are more likely to stay in deferred compensation than the population at large. And one of the reasons that they think this could be is that folks lower on the income scale might not have as many retirement savings vehicles available to them. You might have to have $1,000 or $5,000 to open up a investment account somewhere. But with the auto enrollment plan, you just start right away. And I think this is a really big thing as the state is focused on equity within the state at large, is that this is a way to promote retirement equity for folks through this auto enrollment program. So I have a ton more I could say about auto enrollment, a whole additional presentation. And I know there might be folks in the audience watching on TVW who are really excited about retirement stuff. If folks want to hear more about this, please feel free to reach out to me. If folks on the committee want to dive deeper into this data, I'm certainly more than willing to talk to folks about the auto enrollment program. I think it's had a huge success, and it's not been something that we've talked that much about as a state up until this point. So I'm going to pause for a second, see if there's any questions about DCP in general or auto enrollment specifically before I jump into the Roth conversation. So I'll just pause for a second, Mr. Chair, and see if there's any questions.
I am not seeing any questions at the moment, Seth.
Perfect. So we'll jump into the Roth discussion. I know this was a specific point of some questions that came up in the last meeting. There's been some interest from constituents in correspondence over the last year or so. So I'm going to provide a little bit of background information about what a Roth is and Roth within the DCP program as an option. So I mentioned earlier that DCP or 457 plans in general have some optional features that plan administrators or plan sponsors can choose to participate in. One of those options is what would be referred to as a Roth option. And that's been an option since 2011. And what that means is that if that option is available, people would have the opportunity to put in after-tax contributions. So normally 457 plans have pre-tax contributions that are going in. So if you put in $100, you might only see $80 reduction in your take-home pay because of the pre-tax nature. With a Roth option, if you're going to contribute $100, you'd actually see $100 less in your take-home pay because it's after-tax money that's being put into the fund. The advantage of the Roth option, though, then would be that when you are withdrawing the funds, if you meet certain criteria, there is no tax on any earnings that have been made. So probably the biggest question that DRS gets around Roth options are more around why doesn't DRS offer a Roth IRA? And an IRA, an individual retirement account, is just what it sounds like. It's an individual retirement account. It's something that a person signs up for on their own through some sort of private investment option, through Fidelity, Vanguard, Schwab, T. Rowe Price, any one of those private entities. A person signs up and creates their own account and participates in that way. So that's a IRA option. A Roth IRA option would fall under that. And you'll oftentimes hear from financial professionals that this is a really great way to start saving for retirement. It is a really great way to save for retirement through a Roth IRA option. There are some limitations on who can participate in a Roth IRA, and so this is sometimes why folks are interested in a Roth 457 option. So with a Roth IRA, you can only contribute up to $6,000 if you're under the age of 50. And there are certain income thresholds. I think currently it's like $140,000. If you make more than $140,000 as an individual, or more than $208,000 as a couple filing jointly, you're not able to participate in an IRA option. So a Roth 457 is just a 457 plan like DCP that offers a Roth option within it. So 457 plans are only available for state or local government employees, and a Roth option would be within that plan. So there are no income limitations to who could participate. And then the contribution limits are the same as DCP in general. So for people who are under the age of 50, they could put up to $19,500 currently into a Roth 457 plan if that was offered. I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of tax nuance here, and I've probably just exhausted as much as I can say about the tax nuance involved. I think one of my biggest concerns about offering a Roth option is the sort of tax nuance questions that DRS would receive. And I think we're perfectly fine deferring those sorts of questions for a person to go talk to their CPA or go talk to their financial planner. But there's a lot of tax nuance that happens in here, and it's very difficult to say what's the best option for a person. It's a very individualized discussion. So big question that we get, why doesn't DRS currently offer a Roth option within the 457? As I said, it's been available as an option since 2011. It's something that we've evaluated a number of times to see if it was something that we should be offering. But we've had a number of other priorities since then that have come up. As I mentioned earlier, auto enrollment in 2017 was a big lift for the department to implement that. We've also implemented a new employer reporting application, so a tool for employers to send data to DRS. Obviously, if employers are sending us data about DCP, them sending us data about a Roth option would be another feature, another field that would need to be added. And then we've transitioned record keepers for our Plan 3 and for our DCP a couple of times since 2011. There's also been some research in the 401k space about if people who have a Roth option within their retirement plan take up that Roth option. Vanguard did a study of all of their 401k business, and with people who had an option, about 80% of the plans had a Roth option within it, but only about 12% of the employees who had the option chose to participate in the Roth option. And we've also done some research around the limits of folks who are currently participating in DCP. So about 19% of people who are participating in DCP contribute more than $6,000 a year, which is the limit for a Roth IRA. So that's probably somewhere around the upper limit of people that might be interested in participating in a Roth option. And about, just for reference, about 5% of people who participate in DCP are reaching their maximum contributions or near their maximum contributions. So some other things to consider, and this is the last slide I have. To implement a Roth option, it would require a project, a DRS, to work with our employers and work with our record keeper to have a different type of data come into our system. It's almost like creating a new plan within the deferred compensation program. We've estimated that the cost is somewhere between $600,000 and $1 million, depending on the timing of when it would happen and if we had to contract out some additional resources for that. And just one thing to take into consideration, the deferred compensation program, normally enhancements to the program are paid for by the participants. So DRS collects an administrative fee that pays for changes to the plan or pays for our administration of the plan. The cost to implement a Roth would be somewhere between like 1/4 and 40% of our annual administrative fee. So one option would be if this was paid for through a decision package or a fiscal note through general fund dollars, it wouldn't negatively impact the participants. One thing we've heard from folks who are currently participating in DCP who don't want to have a Roth option is that they don't want to have to pay for someone else to have that Roth option, if only a small portion of the people are going to participate in it. So, and then the other thing just to be aware of, I just mentioned, there is federal legislation being thrown about. Who knows exactly what will come out of it. It's been referred to as Secure Act 2.0 that may change what options are available within different retirement plans. It may strongly encourage plans to offer a Roth option, but it may do any number of additional things. There's lots of different versions of that legislation out there right now, but we're tracking that legislation with our federal tax council to make sure that deferred comp still falls well within the requirements. So that is it for my prepared presentation. I'll pause again to see if there's any questions.
I've actually got a question for you, Seth, about something you said right at the very end, that there was some concern amongst the current 457 participants about the admin fee paying for a Roth option. Is the department, either under state law or federal tax law, required to assess the same admin fee for both, if there were to be a Roth option, for both the Roth plan and, is there a uniformity requirement that everybody pay the same fee? Or could you assess a higher Roth fee because there was lower people to spread it around?
Yeah, we've looked at this a couple of different ways. If there was a way for it sort of to be pre-funded and then the administrative fee to pay back that. My understanding is that it would be very complicated to charge different fees because you could have half your dollars or go into a Roth option and then change and switch over and go into the other, to the pre-tax option. So I wouldn't say it would be impossible. I'd like to do a little bit more research on the federal tax implications of that if we were charging different fees, but I do think it could be possible. I think it probably would be more burdensome to do and more costly that way. And so it might not be cost effective to do.
Okay. I see that Anthony Murrieta has his hand up. Anthony.
Anthony, I can't hear you. It looks like you're off mute, so I'm not quite sure what's going on.
I suppose it's possible it was a rogue hand, rogue mouse click. Oh, just went down. Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands, Seth. And Anthony, if you did want to say something, shoot your hand back up and we'll try to figure out a way to make it work. Okay, I think that might be it for questions, Seth. And then are you going to introduce Fred, or should I do that? I'm sorry. Looks like Senator Conway got his hand up. Senator Conway.
Yeah, I think I'm unmuted here. My question is, do any of our local government offer the Roth IRA currently?
Yeah, so not a Roth IRA, but my understanding is that many or most 457 plans that are offered from local governments do offer a Roth option.
Okay, thank you. And how do they manage the administrative fund?
But yeah, my understanding is that they charge the same administrative fee across the board.
Thank you.
And I would just qualify that our administrative fee is usually much lower than the other funds.
Okay, I now see Anthony's got his hand back up. Anthony, do you want to try again? Anthony, if you want to shoot me an email with your question real quick, I can ask Seth for you. Also, looks like Representative Fitzgibbon has got a question. Representative Fitzgibbon.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Seth. This is not immediately related to the Roth IRA presentation you just did, although that was very helpful to me. This is a little bit tangential, but it was prompted by your discussion, Seth, of the automatic enrollment. And I guess I'm just interested in Senator Conway's bill on inactive accounts. If if Seth, you could just give like a 30-second update on sort of where the department is in the rulemaking authorized by that bill.
Yeah, regarding inactive accounts, for those who were unaware, the last year, the committee sponsored legislation that the department would create rules regarding accounts that are under $1,000 for Plan 2 and 3 members. Plan 1, 2, and 3 members who are non-vested, to basically close out those accounts. So we are in the process. We're working with our federal tax counsel. We're also working with our consultant who helps us with defined contribution account specialties to create a process for, my understanding is we have to notify folks that they have that money available, and then if they do not take it as a refund of contributions, roll over the money into an IRA. And so we would likely need to work with a record keeper partner to create those accounts. And we are in the process of creating a notification process. So I don't have the time frame off the top of my head, Representative Fitzgibbon, but I can follow up with you and let you know what the scale or what the time frame is. But I know we're in the process of working through that.
Thanks. Yeah, no need to follow up. That answers my question. Thank you, Seth.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now I'm seeing no other questions, but Seth, if you could stand by, because I'm hopeful that Anthony Mureta might be sending me a question to ask you. So if you could stand, don't go too far away, but I think now we're going to hear from Fred. Oh man, I'm sorry, Fred. Fred Gierstad, Assistant Senior Investment Officer for the State Investment Board.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right.
I can.
That is the, I have two sons that work in tech in Boston, and they constantly make fun of me for this. But that's all right. Let's see if I can do the share screen here. And I will go to the presentation. I will share that. Okay, can you see the presentation there? All right, I take that as a yes. So just for the record, Fred Gierstad, I am an investment officer at the State Investment Board, and on standby today, I also have our Director of Institutional Relations, Chris Phillips, in case some other questions on this subject might arise. So I put in a little bit of an agenda here, just a little bit of background information. I'm not sure how much the members of this committee know about this project and then the background of it. And but you know, this is an update meeting, and so feel free to ask questions underway or at the end, and I will try to answer them best I can. And just a little bit of the background here. This project started before I even got to the State Investment Board back in 2015, 2016. And it was all about adding private assets to the target date funds. The target date funds became the default option in both Plan 3 and the DCP. And we've been looking to enhance the return expectation, the experience for our members as they started to invest in the target date funds. So we have worked at the WSIB, have worked very closely with DRS over the years, update meetings there, and we continue to work very closely with DRS as we are now getting closer and closer to the implementation. Up to this whole process, we have hired consultants to look at, for example, the liquidity, to making sure that we can handle the volume, to make sure it didn't hurt one plan versus the other plan. All of those have been put to rest as we have gone through this, and so it kind of gives us this kind of a stamp of approval, so to speak, that they're not running into any issues, or the market environment has changed dramatically from the period of 2016 when we started this. The AB, that is formerly known as Alliance Bernstein, they are the current target date fund manager. Actually, this project has taken so long, so during this whole process, we actually went in and did another search for a target date fund manager. AB came out as the the chosen ones there that we stayed with them, but it was very interesting to hear other target date fund managers as well as they opined on this project. So I'll just move forward here. The target date funds and the glide path go hand in hand. The target date funds, we think about it as set it and forget it. So for example, myself in the DCP, I'm invested in the year I'm going to retire. So 2065, I'm going to be around for a couple of more years. And that target date, so you get in there and you stay in there. The glide path is the asset allocation that dictates how much we put in an asset class. So for example, very young, in the 2065, they got a lot of growth equity. not a lot of fixed income. But then as you're nearing retirement and into retirement, you will see that you have some inflation protection. So you have some treasury inflation protected security, tips, some more fixed income, but at the same time, a little bit of equity as well as, people have, as they move in and have some longevity there. And so the TAP, which stands for the Total Allocation Portfolio, that's part of a DB plan, a unitized version of that has the asset allocation, will become part of this glide path, and the percentage of how much it will be in the TAP per vintage varies from, I can say it, I think from a minimum of 10% to a maximum of 25% right there in the meaty part of the curve, the 2035, the 2040, the 2045 vintages. So a lot of the question is sort of, it's obviously why are we doing it? And we wouldn't do it if it wasn't a good thing for our participants. This is all in the best interest of the participants. The DB plan has had a long and very successful investment horizon, investing in private assets, but also we have public equity in there that's active, we have fixed income that is active, and we have tangibles. And so all of these working together pushes the expected return results over time. Over this here, we're looking at a 10-year horizon. It's pushing out this growth rate to the northeast. That's where we want to be. And so we're seeing this. This is all based upon our projections, working with our target date fund manager, looking into getting the capital market assumptions, and also at the same time looking on the right there, you're seeing you're seeing very, very marginal increase in the expected risk, the volatility of return, and so based upon this, and this is something that we have tested. We have tested this probably 2, 3, 4 times during this project to make sure that, yes, this is still a good thing to do for our participants. Then that's not only the return, the diversification that we're getting by adding the privates into these target date funds is this. And if you were around for March 2020 when we had a little hiccup in the market, I would say I was around in 2008. In March 2020, I was even around for August 1998, if people remember that. March 2020 was one of those when you walk into you walked out to your car and you started your engine. You were actually surprised the engine started because nothing else actually worked in the market. But this is all about the probability of experiencing major drawdown. Remember, our participants they're going in, set it and forget it, and you're hanging out. But always when you get these major drawdown, it kind of upsets people. People do suboptimal things in these periods. So by adding these diversification, adding more asset classes to the mix, adding some characteristics of the privates that we like over the long run, it kind of buffers this potential drawdown pre-retirement and also post-retirement. And this is a very we feel a very big benefit, especially since and I'm moving my hands around, you probably can't see me, but especially as we pushing this return expectations out as well. So those two, there's a couple of other smaller benefits that we like as well, but these are kind of the two major reasons for why we think this is a very, very good idea. And this is, again, it's a very fluid, it's a dynamic process. We look at this ongoing. Right now, there's a board meeting coming up tomorrow at the WSIB where we're going to talk about all capital market assumptions. So all of this kind of flows together. So it's not like we don't set it and forget it on this one. This is a very fluid, always looking at to see what the optimal asset allocation is across the glide path. And then just here's some benefits of doing it. A big thing was that we don't have to introduce a whole new private investment process. It's what we're using has already been in existence for a very long time. I'd like to say we know what we're doing. We have a history of doing it. We have the relationships with our partners on the private assets, intangibles, in the innovation, private equity, and private real estate, and you get immediate access to this program. It's a program that will have oversight. This is not, we just not putting private in to have private. It is a very thought out private investment process that being put there. And then doing it avoids the cost and the risk and the complexities of starting something all new. Here, they will already participate. They get to participate in something that is existent. It keeps the fees, we feel, very reasonable. And so that is another big reason for why we're using the TAP. And here's just some conclusions. Again, we continue to do the research just to make sure that it makes sense. And also from an operational standpoint, there has been a ton of work on the operational standpoint. If I were to thank everyone that's worked on that, some of them actually have retired and they left and come back. So it's been a very, very long time. And also working with DRS, working with Voya, the record keeper on this. And right now we're also working with DRS, Voya, AB, WSIB, so that when we go live, the first trade will take place on October 14th, 2021. All the operational kink has been worked out. We're ready to go, and you know, we cross our fingers for that day. So, Mr. Chair, that checking my notes. That concludes my remarks. I'll be happy to take any questions on this and clarify anything you might find a little odd. So.
Yeah, thanks, Fred. Does anybody have any questions for Fred? I'm not seeing any, Fred. I guess I just had one question that I think I understand, but I could be wrong. But if I'm right, I think it might be helpful for some of my colleagues. You know, on slide 5, it looked like the expected returns would go up maybe a little bit, but the volatility would actually go down. And then obviously on slide 6, it sort of shows the risk of a drawdown event decreasing significantly. My sense is that, I mean, it's sort of counterintuitive, right? Private markets are generally a little more risky, a little more illiquid. So how on earth are we able to reduce the risk of a drawdown? How are we able to reduce volatility? And I think it's just because the assets, the investments that you get through the private markets are very uncorrelated with the traditional public market returns. And so through that diversification, you're able to keep returns about the same or maybe even increase them, but essentially through timing what's up when and what's down when, you're able to smooth them out to reduce the risk. Is that sort of it? I mean, could you maybe explain as an actual professional, not just somebody who took a finance class in college, how this is able to actually reduce overall risk in addition to increasing return?
Yeah, so you touched on a lot of what did I say, benefits of private assets, and not private assets as a standalone, but private assets combined with public assets, right? So you're absolutely right. There's an uncorrelated rate of return, or uncorrelated returns within private assets and public assets. Public assets react right away. They're traded every day, and if people, you know, Seth was mentioning earlier, you know, if people want GameStop, you know, GameStop's going to move the whim of the market on any given day. Within private, there's a potentially lag there, right? And saying, okay, this is we own the company. There's not like a readily market going out and saying, for example, Uber, before Uber went public, it's like, well, what is it really worth? You kind of get the valuation when they go out and get another round of funding. You will have at least once a year, you will have an audit, a good, what should I say, valuation of these companies. But so, for example, it's even in March, you could see that sales that were going on, for example, started in end of 2019, came to fruition in March of 2020. So, you know, we could have seen a little bump because finally we got the valuation that the firms were worth in March 2020. But at the same time, a lot of the other ones got written down but there's an uncorrelated return there. That doesn't mean we view them as less risky. So in the optimization, when it comes in, we still think of private as a risky asset class because it is equities, but when the way it works out in the time series, it just reduces the volatility. So you're right, and we also get, not to introduce too many concepts here, we also get an uncorrelated alpha return over the expected benchmark, which is a benefit as well.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I'm trying to check the hand raise. Thank you, Fred. That was really helpful. Tracy, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Hey, Fred, thanks for a really nice presentation. This is very timely for us to talk about because we will be, DRS, will be sending out notification to participants about the change in the TAP funds. And so as Fred said, this is the default. And so everyone's defaulted in who contributes to both plans 3 and DCP. And so we will notify them of the private markets component, private equity component of the TAP. And we'll do our best to describe it in a way that a non-investor will understand it. And it will also talk, as Fred said, about a slight fee increase. The fee increase will vary depending on the vintage. So the year that you expect to retire, it will be lower for someone like me who's closer to retirement because it will have less private equity involved in it. And it will be higher for a person who's younger because they have more private equity. So touched a little bit more. So we'll be sending that out probably mid to late August to notify folks that there will be a change in the target funds in their fees that they pay. And you guys might hear about that.
Okay, thanks, Tracy. Any other questions for Fred? Okay, seeing none, before we move on to the next item, I did get an email from Anthony, whose mic is not working, who had a question for Seth. So are you still around, Seth, to answer Anthony's question real quick?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Anthony was wondering that if a member of deferred comp plan has already maxed out, may that person also participate in the Roth deferred comp plan?
That is a good question, and thank you. I meant to actually address that specifically. Within a 457, you have contribution rate limits, and it doesn't matter if they are Roth or non-Roth. So, for example, I'm under the age of 50, I can only contribute 19.5, whether they're Roth or non-Roth. So if I've already met my limit, or if I've already met my limit, I can't then switch to the Roth option. But I can contribute to DCP and a Roth IRA. Those limits are separate. And so if I'm contributing 19.5 in DCP, I can also contribute 6,000 in my Roth IRA, whether the 457 is a Roth option or not. So hopefully that is clear.
Okay, thanks, Seth, and thanks, Anthony, for being flexible. Sorry again about the tech issues. Those always the downside of these kinds of meetings. Also, I see Annette has her hand up. I'm not sure if this is a question for Seth about deferred comp or if it was a late hand for Fred, but Annette, go ahead.
Okay, I have another one for Seth on the Roth IRA. So I'm a little concerned about the cost benefit analysis on the Roth IRA, because you had mentioned a percentage of customers or clients in the Roth or deferred comp that's $6,000, and that clients would be probably in line to go to Roth over the $6,000. And I didn't catch what that percentage was of customers. Did you remember?
Yeah, so about 19% of customers are currently contributing $6,000 or more into deferred comp. And okay. I think there's probably, as far as the cost benefit, I think there are probably some additional questions about how many people might new
Yeah.
contributions could go into Roth, but it's also possible that a person with an account balance could convert their current DCP money into a Roth option. That's another optional thing that people have the ability to
Conversion.
do. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I think theoretically that somebody that's doing the max would be somebody that would be targeted to go into a Roth. But then you have those income limits that deferred comp wouldn't necessarily have access to. And for an individual right now, it's 140,000 for AGI. And for a married couple, it's 220 or 200 or 206, I think. And so, that can be all your other income that other people have. So it's pretty, those are limiting factors. And so it's not always something that's going to be available for everyone. So I would be concerned that it is open for everybody. So that's it for me.
Yeah, it definitely is. I just want to make clear, it is an option that anyone would have the ability to participate in. It's just who might take advantage of it.
Yeah. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Seth and Fred. I am not seeing any other questions, so I think we are good to move on to agenda item 4, which is an update on PSERS and left to disability benefits from Aaron Gutierrez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have lost the button to share my screen. It was here a minute ago. Oh, there it is. Okay. You should be seeing the presentation. Please let me know if you're not seeing that. Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. For the record, Aaron Gutierrez, committee staff. So this is an issue that the committee discussed quite a bit over the last few years. Last year's discussion started off with a comparison of PSERS and left to disability benefits. Then over time, the committee asked the staff to take a bill that had been introduced in the 2020 session, roll that forward for analysis and possible sponsorship for the 2021 session. That was to appear on the December agenda. However, the December meeting was canceled. And so what I was planning to do for today is proceed as though the December meeting hadn't been canceled, as though this were the December meeting. That said, however, you're not bound by that. The committee doesn't have to stick to this particular bill draft. If you'd like, you can at any point go back to the drawing board and consider how you want to move forward. Or you could take this as a continuation of December. It seemed like the most logical starting point for this presentation, but again, you're not bound by that at all. So with that in mind, today I'll start with a quick refresher and then talk about the bill itself. So prior to 2006, all of the positions that are now in PSERS were PERS positions. When PSERS was created, I heard this phrase that I think is fairly useful. The idea was to capture folks who carry badges and guns, but aren't police or firefighters. And so the original group included, for example, corrections officers and limited authority law enforcement officers. Over time, that's evolved a little bit. It includes now, I believe, fish and wildlife officers. It includes positions that provide nursing care to certain offender populations, that sort of thing. But in general, it's positions that involve a little more risk and than the average PERS position, but isn't necessarily a police or fire position. The benefits provided for that plan are somewhat in the middle between PERS and LEF. I don't want to say that they're precisely right down the middle, but they do fit a certain middle ground between those two plans. Before I show you the exact benefits, it's important to capture this idea of total disability, sometimes called catastrophic disability or total incapacitation. It's the idea that, for comparison, it might be easiest to talk about what it's not. So members can receive an injury that is disabling in a number of different ways. For example, you could have an injury that takes you off of the job for a couple of weeks, what we call a temporary disability. Then there's also a disability that takes you out of your current job, but still allows you to work. Like, say you have a job that requires you to climb a ladder. You may experience an injury that prevents you from climbing ladders, so you can't do that job anymore. But say you're still able to do a desk job or any number of other jobs. In the case of total disability, we're talking about someone who is unable to perform any substantial gainful activity, and that's due to a physical or mental condition that's expected to result in death, or may be expected to result in death, and is expected to last at least 12 months. And with that in mind, this table here shows the disability benefits for both PCERS and LEF2. And I should note that actually the PCERS column, this is going to be the same as what you'd see in PERS as well. So for someone who receives an injury that is not duty related but is permanent, that individual will be given the better of either a refund of contributions plus interest, so refund of their contributions to the system plus interest, or their accrued benefit actuarially reduced. And that actuarial reduction is something I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. But again, they'll receive generally the better of those two. If the injury was duty related, for example, you got injured directly on the job or something related to that, for the member of PCERS, their benefit is going to be the same as if it was not duty related. So if you were injured on the job, your benefit is the same as if you were injured on vacation. For the LEF2 members, however, there is a different benefit. They will receive the better of a lump sum of 150% of their contributions tax-free, or their accrued benefit, 10% of which would be tax-free, or a minimum of their 10% of their final average salary. If someone receives an injury that results in the total disability or total incapacitation, again, for the PCERS member, it's going to be the same as if they were injured on their own vacation. For the LEF2 member, they would receive the better of the accrued benefit actuarially reduced, or 70% of their final average salary combined with offsets from Social Security and L&I for no more than a total of 100% of their final average salary. So this is the current disability benefits. When we talk about the actuarial reduction, it's important to understand that that's based on your normal retirement age. So if you receive that injury at age, say, 50, if you're in LEF2, the normal retirement age is 53. So you'd receive an actuarial reduction for 3 years. If you were a member of PCERS, the normal retirement age is either age 65 with 5 years of service in any system, or age 60 with at least 10 years of service in the PCERS system. And so for that person, if they received an injury at age 50, most likely that would be a 10-year reduction. This brings us to the bill that we were asked to look at. That was House Bill 2533, originally sponsored in 2020. However, no movement was made on this bill in the 2021 session. This bill would have provided PCERS members with enhanced disability benefits, specifically in that total disability or total incapacitation zone. I got a little bit more on the slide, but it's probably easiest to see all of it if we go back to that earlier table and just show the change here. As you can see under the effect of the bill in the total incapacitation zone for PCERS, the benefit would now be the same as LEF2, except that they would receive an actuarial reduction based on the PCERS retirement eligibility instead of LEF2. So I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. So when we talk about the actuarial reduction, if we imagine two identical employees, one is a PCERS employee and one is a LEF2 employee, and they're both age 41, they have 10 years of service, and their salary is $87,000 a year. If they were to receive an unreduced annual benefit based on that, that benefit will be $17,400 per year. However, let's assume that a disability occurs, and the person then chooses the monthly benefit. If they choose that monthly benefit in PSERS, that member's benefits will be reduced from age 60, which brings it down to a grand total of $3,270 per year. For the LEF2 member, that would be a reduction from age 53, which would bring them down to a reduced a yearly benefit of $6,350. So again, the benefit is essentially the same, but it's reduced from a different age. In terms of the costs for the bill, I'll talk first about the administrative costs, then the actuarial costs. There was a fiscal note from the 2020 session that showed roughly $100,000 as a one-time cost for implementation. That number would likely be updated if it was introduced again next session, but we did ask DRS about it. They think it'd be roughly the same cost if reintroduced. In terms of the actuarial impacts, because of a lack of data, the state actuary's fiscal note showed a range of potential costs. As you can see on this slide here, a range for the contribution rates between 0.06% and 0.45%. And then for the budget, the 25-year cost, the biennium cost is somewhat moot since 2 years have gone by, but the 25-year cost would range between about 19 million and about 140 million. Since that time, the State Actuary's Office has received new data. It's helpful, but may not be enough to actually get it to a best estimate. If this were to be repriced, there's still a good chance that it would be indeterminate but with hopefully a narrower range. We thought it might also be helpful to note this idea of the offsets. When we talk about the member's benefit being 70% of their final average salary, the actual cost to the state may not be the actual 70% of final average salary. So the member's maximum total benefit is going to be capped at 100%, including those offsets from SSDI and LNI. However, the Social Security and LNI both pay first. So ultimately, they pay first, and then the pension benefit fills in the rest of that 70% up to a total of 100%. And so since the Social Security and LNI benefits usually end up being about 60 to 80% of the member's salary, ultimately the pension system only ends up paying about 20 to 40%. Now, the pension system can pay more than that, but this is just generally on average, it's going to be, the pension system is only going to be paying about 20 to 40% for that 70% benefit. So again, assuming that the bill is what we wanted to focus on, I have some initial policy considerations here. This can all be revised if the committee wants to go any sort of different route. But assuming that you do want to talk about this particular bill, first off is the legislative policy. We talk about a lot in this committee that the legislature has adopted the policy of providing similar benefits to members unless a difference is warranted. Over the years, the legislature has recognized that, has granted public safety plans better benefits, both LEF2 and PSERS, particularly in the realm of death and disability. Second, as I noted, PSERS was created as a sort of middle ground between PERS and LEF. Again, not precisely down the middle, but roughly in the middle between the two. Now that PSERS has had more than 15 years, it has been in existence for more than 15 years, it's a good chance for you to step back and say, and ask, are these benefits where we think they should be? That includes the death and disability benefits. And then finally, there's the issue of pension leapfrogging, which we see come up periodically. It's the idea that when one group gets a benefit improvement, other groups may want that. Or, for example, if you're in a group that has better benefits and you see the other plan get an increase, you may also want a commensurate increase in your benefits as well. Ultimately, though, it's important to remember that when we're talking about jobs with higher risk, pension benefits do not change that job risk. They don't make the job any less dangerous. They do, however, or they can, however, impact the length of exposure to that. So if you, between things like disability benefits or early retirement ages, you can impact how long a member is exposed to that risk. But again, the pension benefits themselves don't change the actual day-to-day risks of the job. So finally, that leaves us with next steps for the committee. Nothing is required, no committee action is required today. You do have the option always of doing nothing further at this time. If you're interested, you can, the executive committee can direct the staff to develop other options. Or if you like 2533 and you'd like to move that forward, you have the option of asking staff to officially roll it forward with a new draft number and then consider that for possible endorsement for the 2022 session. That concludes my prepared remarks, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Aaron. Anybody have any questions for Aaron? Aaron, I am not seeing anybody. And since it looks like we are a few minutes behind, perhaps we should take advantage of the lack of questions and move on to the next agenda item, which is a briefing on Plan 1 COLAs from Melinda.
So just give me 1 second. Should be able to see my presentation momentarily. I see some heads nodding. So good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Melinda Osblockson, committee staff. Today I'll be providing an educational briefing on Plans 1 COLAs. So we'll begin with a brief history on this topic, current Plan 1 COLA offerings, some purchasing power analysis that's been done, consider it purchasing power light, and then we'll transition to policy considerations and design and implementation options should the committee wish to pursue further study of this topic, this interim or a possible proposal. And then lastly, we'll cover next steps. So the topic of COLAs has been studied quite extensively by the Select Committee over the years. So I won't be covering all the details. I'll just kind of cover the highlights and maybe more recent highlights. So the SCPP studied the issue of purchasing power for Plans 1 retirees in 2003 and 2004, and then also received updates in 2005 and 2008, and then studied the issue every year in 2016 through 2019. SCPP request legislation was enacted for one-time COLAs or ad hoc COLAs, I'll use that interchangeably today, in 2018 and 2020. Most recently, at the committee's meeting last month, stakeholder correspondence was received and individuals provided public comments. The executive committee discussed this topic, and then it was added to this meeting's agenda. So diving into a little bit of the history of Plans 1 COLAs. So historically, minimum benefits have been provided as a way to protect purchasing power for retirees receiving the smallest pension benefits. Minimum benefits are based upon a certain salary threshold and have been adjusted going back to the 60s, but more regularly beginning in the 80s. Prior to 1995, COLA increases were primarily ad hoc, one-time increases in pension benefits. Those were provided at legislative discretion and were typically 3%. Beginning in 1995, the UCOLA, or Uniform Cost of Living Adjustment, was essentially an automatic COLA. was established, and it provided for a fixed dollar amount multiplied by a member's total years of service, and the dollar amount of the UCOLA increased by 3% every year on July 1st. It was deemed this was not a contractual right, and then it was in effect until 2011, at which time it was repealed. So beneficiaries last received a UCOLA in July of 2010. I'll note that the repeal included a one-time increase of $500 in the alternate minimum benefit. So after the repeal, so beginning in 2012, essentially, ad hoc one-time COLAs just may be approved by the legislature. And most recently, as I mentioned, SCPP request legislation was enacted in both 2018 and 2020. In 2018, the bill provided for a 1.5% increase, and in 2020, a 3% increase, with and both had a cap of $62.50 per month for all retirees not eligible for the minimum benefits. So transitioning from the history, we can take a look at the current Plans 1 COLA offerings or adjustments that are currently in effect. So in 1987, the optional COLA was created by the legislature, and this is essentially an option for retirees to buy inflation protection at the time of their retirement. Selecting this optional COLA does result in an actuarially reduced benefit at the start of retirement. The trade-off is that this helps guarantee, some level of purchasing power throughout retirement. The COLAs occur annually in July for this benefit. So there are two types of minimum benefits. So the basic minimum benefit is essentially a flat dollar amount per year of service that's used to calculate eligibility for an annual increase that, if it's applicable, is added to a member's monthly pension. And so the way this works, as of July 1, 2021, if a retiree's benefit is less than the amount here on the slide, $67.49, then it's multiplied. That amount is multiplied by their years of service, and this is done before a reduction for benefit payment options, say a survivor option benefit. And you would be eligible for an annual increase if that $67.49 multiplied by your years of service is more than your current pension. And so the current annual increase amount, if you qualify, would be $2.61 multiplied by your years of service and then added to your monthly pension. And this annual increase was a component of the prior UCOLA. That might sound familiar from a couple slides ago, but it's now only available to those who are eligible to receive the basic minimum. And it was added to the minimum benefit in 1995 to provide this kind of uniform benefit increase each year without kind of ongoing legislative action. And so over the last 10 years, the basic minimum benefit on average has increased by 4.25% per year. So the second type of minimum benefit is the alternate minimum benefits. Plans 1 members with either 25 years of service that have been retired at least 20 years or 20 years of service that have been retired at least 25 years are eligible for the alternate minimum. And this benefit is currently the $2,076.34 that you see on the slide. And that's per month, and that increases by 3% annually. So moving along, so this slide highlights the beneficiary profiles. So I'll just touch on a few things on here. So you'll see 61,400 or approximately 79% of retirees are included in the no minimum benefit group, which means the majority of retirees do not receive annual increases under the minimums I described previously. However, this group did receive COLAs in 2018 and 2020. I'd like to mention, though, the magnitude of the impact on that COLA might vary by individual because increases were capped at no more than $6,250 per month. I think that's $25,000 annually. So also more highly compensated plans 1 retirees fall into the no minimum benefit group. And they're also the retiree group with the most service credit and who have been retired for the fewest number of years. In terms of key drivers behind the basic minimum, recipients in this category have a much lower average final compensation, and key drivers for the alternate minimums are a relatively low average final compensation and much longer retirements. So we're going to dive into some purchasing power analysis light. These are at a high level and not a member by member analysis. The next 2 slides, which are a couple of visuals, so just want to caveat that. So this slide shows the percent change in CPI for Seattle Tacoma Bellevue from 2011 to 2020. And it also shows the enacted COLAs provided in 2018 and 2020 in orange. The key takeaway here is that CPI increases have not kept pace. Rather, that ad hoc COLAs have not kept pace with CPI changes since the UCOLA repeal. So this chart shows the cumulative effects of the CPI changes over the last 10 years compared to the COLA adjustments provided to Plans 1 retirees. So during the last 10 years, you can see that CPI has increased every year. Probably recall that from the prior slide. And that's in that the green line. And while there's been 2 COLAs that have been provided in 2018 and 2020. So what you can see is this difference that despite those 2 COLAs that are represented in that orange line, there's still a net purchasing power loss of about 20%. And so this is a more simplified kind of analysis of the changes. So like I said, it doesn't include this, individual member by member experience. I think that takes much more time for us to kind of pull together. And then you can also see this blue line above the green line represents employees that are eligible, retirees that are eligible for the alternate benefit. And so because those minimums include a 3% increase every year, and CPI has not increased by 3% every year. Retirees who are eligible for the alternate minimum are outpacing CPI or inflation, so maybe gaining some purchasing power. And then the basic minimum on average over the last 10 years, so since the UCOLA repeal, that increase has been about 4.25%. So that's that top line. I just want to mention, though, the majority of retirees are represented in this orange line, which was, that 79% or 61,400 that I mentioned on the prior slide. So only about 20% are tracking above CPI. So some key takeaways. The majority of retirees do not receive a COLA under Plans 1. Purchasing power of retirees has not kept pace with CPI changes since the UCOLA repeal. Over time, a higher proportion of retirees in Plans 1 will become eligible under the minimums in the absence of ad hoc or permanent COLAs, right? As the minimums increase and pensions do not. And retirees receiving an annual increase under the minimums are generally higher than observed CPI increases. And if you note, those on the basic minimum have low benefits, but have maintained purchasing power since receiving the benefits. So this doesn't contemplate kind of the lost purchasing power that may have occurred prior to becoming eligible for the basic minimum. And then those on the alternate minimum have slightly higher benefits than the basic, but have lost more purchasing power, generally due to longer retirements. And also more recent Plans 1 retirees have experienced maybe less consistent benefit improvements because there's been those two improvements in 2018 and 2020 since the repeal. So moving along, so this is a sampling of recent costs related to Plans 1 COLA proposals based on published fiscal notes. All costs are a 10-year total employer cost with the session year noted in parentheses. So the first bullet is really just that permanent COLA that's identical to what's offered in the current Plans 2 and 3. And that was priced in 2020 and it runs about $7.6 billion. Another option, the ad hoc 3% COLA to all annuitants. It's priced in 2018 and runs $589 million. Third bullet, providing a $2 monthly increase per service year for all annuitants, regardless of receiving the minimum benefits earned. Was $497 million and last priced in 2017. And then lastly, ad hoc COLAs ranging from 1.5% to 3% with specified caps to all annuitants not receiving benefits. So that 80% ranged from 144 to 381 million. And the 3% that was enacted in 2020, I just want to add the current UAAL payments are ongoing for those COLAs that are provided under that bullet. So policy considerations, this isn't an exhaustive list of policy considerations, but I did think it would be helpful for the committee to start to see some of these and ones that might be top of mind. So COLA policy, automatic COLAs to retirees. You can infer that this might be the state's policy, since the creation of Plans 2, at which time those plans included the design and funding for an ongoing COLA for retirees. FERS and TERS 1 are the exception and are also the only plans that have an unfunded accrued actuarial liability. So a likely reason for no permanent Plans 1 COLAs is cost. However, there could be ways to manage cost or balance policy objectives to meet that goal. And benefit adequacy, it speaks to how well a benefit can provide for an expected standard of living. So the pension of a highly paid retiree, under the circumstances, may lose considerable purchasing power over time, but could still be considered adequate, while the pension of a low-paid retiree may gain purchasing power over time, but still be considered inadequate to provide for an expected standard of living. Those with higher benefits lose purchasing power, but their benefit may be considered more adequate, say, than retirees on the minimums. And of course, what is adequate to one may not be to another. Purchasing power protection is is really impacted by three factors, inflation after retirement, the length of retirement, and post-retirement COLAs. So obviously providing adjustments does protect against this and support benefit adequacy. And then in terms of fiscal constraints, it's just worth noting that any increases would be considered a benefit improvement and could impact the UAAL payoff date. I thought it was important to note there's a couple of goals of the committee, and it's kind of this dichotomy of goals that I understand that might need to be balanced. So goal number 4 is to increase and maintain the purchasing power of retiree benefits in Plans 1 to the extent feasible, and while providing long-term benefit security to retirees. But at the same time, the goal number 5 states that there's a goal to fully amortize the total costs of PERS, TERS, and LEF1 no later than June 30th, 2024. It's not in the too distant future. And then also to establish predictable long-term employer contribution rates, which remain a relatively predictable portion of future state budgets. And so implementing a COLA, would come with the need to be paid off within a 10-year fixed time period according to current law. These goals may be something the committee wishes to revisit at some point as well. So just wanted to highlight these. Some of the policy implications. So just given the considerations shared on the previous slide, COLAs can provide a way to maintain purchasing power. However, when they're not part of the original plan design, they create fiscal impacts and considerations for policymakers to balance. And so as you saw, prior proposals range from 144 million to 7.6 billion. And so if you are concerned about budget or fiscal implications, I just want to say there are numerous ways to tailor COLAs to meet certain policy objectives or to target annuitant groups. And then lastly, that the committee may wish to consider trade-offs, that some of these options may come with trade-offs, like providing a smaller increase or an amount to a larger number of annuitants, or vice versa. So if the committee would like to pursue a COLA, decisions will likely need to be made about who will benefit and how much. So this slide just provides specific options related to COLA design and implementation, and this may provide some food for thought around how the committee could target policy proposals. And I feel like I'm over time, but I don't want to rush through this. So I guess I just want to give an opportunity for the chair to tell me to wrap it up, or I'm fine with being interrupted, but I feel like this is important information, so I'll keep going unless you stop me.
No, I agree, Melinda. I think there's a lot of interest both amongst committee members and the general public on this topic. So okay. I'm perfectly content taking as much time as is necessary.
Okay. It was quicker when I walked through this. So some of the design options could be focusing on CPI as a basis, this consumer price index, to maintain purchasing power, even if there's some limitations around that. You could also consider a years of service or, reward for service model that would recognize those who worked longer and paid longer into the plans. And in that case, you might target a specific type of minimum benefit increase, or a COLA benefiting those with more service years. Additionally, the minimum benefit design, it helps address joint concerns of both purchasing power and benefit adequacy for a subset of retirees. The committee could consider expanding that subset. So as previously shared, the retirees on the minimums have received the most inflation protection once they become eligible for the minimums. However, the majority of retirees aren't eligible for those. So perhaps restructuring benefits. So there's additional retirees eligible for those, because in the absence of permanent COLAs, eventually retirees will become eligible for the minimums. Policymakers could also design around post-retirement inflation impacts and the length of retirement, funding status, the goals or targets around how to pay for the benefit improvements and managing that over the 10-year rolling amortization period could be an element. And then in terms of implementation, the committee might consider flat dollar amounts. They provide proportionally larger increases to members with smaller pensions. So also one-time payments like a 13th payment that provides more of a short-term bump in compensation. And then of course the permanent COLAs and ad hoc COLAs, those fixed percentages kind of help protect against inflation, and at the same time can allow for some ongoing cost control. So all of this is just meant to illustrate the variety of approaches, and I'm sure there's more and options that could be available for consideration. And we'd be happy to dig into these more and that could help guide additional analysis if the executive committee so desires. So some key questions for the committee. Does the committee want to begin working toward a COLA proposal for consideration in the upcoming session? If so, how might you like to proceed? We could revisit a prior COLA proposal that was, some of the samples were listed, develop a new proposal, maybe in coordination with stakeholders, study a proposal that's been articulated by stakeholders. So the correspondence has been healthy, and so there's materials today, or correspondence included in your executive committee materials today. And so, however the committee arrives at kind of a proposal, a possible proposal, we could even look at bringing back additional policy analysis, looking into a specific option or idea impacts of that proposal, illustrating maybe member impacts or how benefits would change, comparing proposals if there were two. I just wanted to mention a few of the ideas that have been shared based on my review of the correspondence, providing a permanent COLA, similar to plans 2 and 3, a 3% ad hoc COLA with a higher cap than you saw in what was implemented in 2018 and 2020, and a 3% ad hoc COLA with no cap, and paying off the UAAL, fully compensating retirees for their loss of purchasing power, to name a few. So as far as next steps, the committee has an opportunity to discuss this topic today. The executive committee may elect to provide direction to staff on how to move forward. And there's also an opportunity to review the work plan during executive committee to see what makes sense and what might be feasible later this interim. And the committee could also determine no further action at this time. And with that, that concludes my prepared remarks. I'm happy to take questions. So thanks for the opportunity.
All right, thank you, Melinda. I have to imagine there will be questions given how much interest this topic has garnered, but I'm not seeing any hands up. So committee members, raise your hand on Zoom if you've got a question. I guess I had one question, Melinda, that's maybe more for some context for me. I think I'm pretty sure you mentioned this, and hopefully I'm recalling correctly, that some of the other plans, like especially the Plan 2 plans, have a built-in COLA feature. Separately but relatedly, I think there's some heightened interest both in academic and popular circles right now about what current inflation is and whether it's sort of transitory or here to stay, and if it's just a function of a few supply chain disruptions for specific products or if it's across the economy. But just for the sake of argument, suppose that we assume 2 or 3% inflation a year, and suddenly there's a 2 or 3 year period where it's like 5 or 6%. How quickly do the plans with a COLA feature built in, how quickly do those benefits adjust for sudden, unexpected increases in inflation?
So I believe it's a look back, and there's a cap on the amount of the COLA that can be provided, no more than 3% per year. So if we experienced higher inflation periods, like you mentioned, the 5% or 6%, that +2 or +3 over that cap gets banked and is kind of set aside and then evaluated when the next adjustment would be calculated. And if that was below the 3, you start to kind of buy down what's in the bank and add that. And so it depends on, I guess, the magnitude of inflation and how that plays out.
If inflation were below that 3% cap, is it sort of reflected in benefits in real time, or is there sort of like a average look back? Here was inflation for the last 5 years, so this is what the benefit will be adjusted for this year. Perhaps that question didn't make a lot of sense.
No, were you saying if inflation was 2%, would a retiree in plans 2 and 3 get 3%, or they would just get the 2%?
I guess what I'm saying is that if it goes from 1 to 2 to 3 to 2 over a period of years, inflation, do the benefits track that in real time, or is it sort of a rolling average?
It's not a roll. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, Mr. Chair, it's not a rolling average.
Okay. So it sort of looks at inflation in real time, but subject to a
3%.
Okay, thank you. That's informative. I'm also still not seeing any other hands raised. So you might be off the hook, Melinda.
Member Murrieta.
I saw Anthony Murrieta's hand pop up. He was having tech problems earlier, so let me check my email to see. No emails from committee members having tech problems. So I think we'll be okay to move on. I know that we're a few minutes behind schedule, but I don't think it was the Plan 1 briefing. I think we started behind schedule, so no worries there, Melinda. With that, we are now at agenda item 6, which is public comment. We have got 62 people viewing, which is higher than I would have expected would tune in on a Tuesday morning to watch people talk about pensions, but perhaps it's because of the issue we were just briefing that a lot of people rightfully care about. In light of both the higher than normal number of folks in the audience who have already raised their hand and the fact that we got a little bit behind schedule, we're gonna do a 2-minute timer for those wishing to provide testimony. If anybody has more than 2 minutes worth of information to share, you are welcome to send written comments to the committee, and we compile those regularly. So if staff could be ready with 2-minute timers, and then for those, we got about 9 hands already up, but for those who aren't familiar with our procedure, if you would like to provide some testimony or written comment to the committee and you're logged on to Zoom, just click the little Zoom raise hand function and we will call on you. I can't promise you'll be called on in the order you raise your hand because I don't know if that's how Zoom displays it for me, but we'll do our best. So if you want to provide comment, just raise your hand. Aaron or whoever is tracking the time, are we ready to start calling on folks?
Sorry about the delay there. I was trying to find the unmute button. I believe we're ready to share the timer on the screen. Beth, please do that if that's ready. There we go.
All right, thanks. First on my list is Christine Craig. Christine.
Hi, I'm sorry, it just now allowed me to unmute. Christine Craig, I'm a retiree, retired in 2004, so I've been retired now for 17 years under the PERS 1 program. I'm hoping that you will consider giving us a permanent COLA. It's been difficult to not have this, and I just read recently that Social Security Administration is considering a 4.5% increase in October. So that must mean that our CPI has gone up. The cost of living is increasing for us. So it's not easy to not get COLAs. And, you know, when I worked for the state of Washington for 32 years, they said that my personnel department said we would get an automatic COLA because at that time, that's what we were getting. So when we lost that COLA 11 years ago, it was difficult for us to not be able to get that, and me personally. So I would like to encourage the committee to consider this and work at least with reinstating our permanent COLA for PERS 1 employees. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Christine. Next on the list is Jose Palmas. Jose, go ahead when you're ready. Jose looks to be on mute. Jose, if you're there, could you unmute yourself?
Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, my name is Jose Palmas.
Jose, I think you might have muted yourself again. Maybe we can reset the timer. Okay,
Sorry about that. Okay. Again, I was retired since 2008, and I too would like to encourage the committee to go towards the permanent solution. While an ad hoc cost of living is appreciated, the costs of food, healthcare, housing, utilities, and so forth are permanent and persistent. So anything you can do that will make a permanent solution is very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Next on the list is Carol Johns. Carol, go ahead when you're ready. And Carol, you're also on mute.
There, I think I'm okay now.
Yep, we can hear you.
Great, very good. Yes, I'm Carol Johns in Spokane, Washington. I worked in Child Protective Services for the state of Washington with a 31-year career. Was not an easy job. Probably is a harder job today, but maybe easier because at the time I did it, we had no cell phones. Going into very dangerous situations. I feel very strongly the older retirees in TERS and PERS 1 are being so unfairly treated. Out of 12 or 13 pension plans that the state of Washington administers, Ours are the only ones with no COLA attached. We are the oldest retirees. I'm 80. And pretty soon, I guess we'll all die off, and then you won't have the problem of treating us fairly. But it is just so unjust that this has not been addressed, that we're still talking about it. I went to a town hall meeting last week and talked to Tim Ormsby, who's head of the budget committee. He said he's talked himself blue in the face to try to get this rectified. So I don't know, we're talking about it today. Do people really understand that we have lost a tremendous amount of purchasing power? My property taxes have gone up substantially, and I'm sure next year it's going to be a big increase because the teachers are all getting, making twice as much money as I ever made, and that comes out of your property taxes. We need to be treated equitably. I'm also assuming that the majority of us is in the PERS and TERS 1 plans are female. I think teachers are predominantly female, and I think a lot of people in the PERS 1 system are female. So I think this is a gender equity issue, as well as just a plain equity issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Next, wishing to comment is Edith Ruby. Edith, go ahead when you're ready. And Edith, make sure you click the unmute button as well.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name is Edith Ruby. I'm here on behalf of the Washington State School Retirees Association. I worked in the Seattle schools for 33 and a half years and retired in 2006 at the age of 65. I knew that with inflation, the buying power of my pension would decrease, but I counted on those small yearly increases from the Uniform COLA to give me a reasonably secure retirement. But because legislators unexpectedly took away our COLA in 2011, I've now lost over 20% of my pension's purchasing power. Clerks at my local supermarket see me as one of their most zealous bargain hunters. I'm the little old lady that's looking for the best bargain. At age 80, that secure retirement seems much less probable. And I urge this body to present legislation for a meaningful plan on COLA to the next legislature. Thank you very much for all of your work.
Thank you, Edith. Next, wishing to provide comment is Claire Olivers. Claire, go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, my name is Claire Olivers. I'm the treasurer for the Retired Public Employees Council of Washington. First, let me thank the legislators for the recent capped 1.5% and 3% COLAs in 2018 and 2020. That's helpful for many of our members, but not sufficient. We really need a predictable, recurring, inflation indexed COLA, similar to the U-COLA that PERS and TERS 1 people had from 95 to 2011 and was in place at the time that I retired. And as I was talking to the DRS rep and making the arrangements, I took the actuarial reduction to ensure my spouse got the same amount after my demise, and talked about the optional COLA. And, she said, why would you do that? You already taken this big reduction and you've got the U-COLA. So why would you do that? Well, that came to pass, of course. And I never did qualify for my first COLA before it was taken away. So that's an important thing from the perspective of the retirees. Also, note that there's funding available. The unfunded liability is being paid down. Last year, the rate to employers was 12.68% on plans on PERS. And this biennium, it's just over 10%. It's projected to go down to a little over 9% and about 8.5% by the time you get to the 25-27 biennium. So there's money available to cover this cost. And the fact that that's being paid off is great. Keep up the pace. And remember that COLA money that's paid out to retirees is spent locally and delivers the same kind of multiplier effect that you hear all the time in hearings about financial issues. And, it's going for basic necessities and it's going close to home. And remember also that these PERS and TERS 1 people are the oldest, longest retired, and have seen the most inflation eating away at their benefit. So I say I'm over time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Claire. Next up is Stephen Lalonde. Stephen, go ahead when you're ready.
Yes, I am one of those who's in the unfortunate situation of having retired in 2010 after the COLA had been taken away from our teaching positions. And then in my retirement have seen it whittled away by lack of an ongoing COLA. I live in Spokane. Our CPI here is comparable to the I-5 corridor. So I am have been reduced by at least the 20% over that time. I've spoken to legislators about this. I have preached a great deal about the need for this to be fair, and it isn't at this point. I dedicated myself to the service of this state, and I did so with the expectation that what had been promised would be there, and it's not. So I highly encourage, and I appreciate the fact that I have the opportunity to speak to you and that hopefully you'll listen to what we're saying. But I do highly encourage that we get some kind of a COLA going, and it should be something that's permanent. It's not acceptable for those who have served the state faithfully to be treated in the way that we have been as a result of this. And it is necessary that this be addressed. We've been talking about it for a long time, and not anything substantial has happened. So it's time for it to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Next up is Fred Yancey. Fred, go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I think you've heard from a number of people regarding, my name is Fred Yancey, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Washington State School Retirees Association. I would just like to draw the committee's attention to two specific letters, one from Dr. Alan Burke that the committee has received, but he'll be speaking to the exec committee later on. And the other is by Gretchen Mcdevitt. I think if the committee looks at that letter, it'll bring the issue of equity into focus. Ms. Mcdevitt points out that since she retired in 2005, plans 2 and 3 members have received over 32.6% increases in their pensions, whereas she, of course, hasn't, due to the fact that they were taken away in 2011. So it's a very unfair situation. She also points out that, and it's important for the committee to know that, she's earning $3,200 a month in retirement benefit. And now that it's $34,000, which is a 7% increase versus, again, the 32.6% increase the other plans have received. It's important for the committee to know that 70% of Plan 1 members in TRS 1 receive less than $2,500, and 71% of teachers, and they well deserve it, earn way more than that. But these salaries go back to base salaries that were back almost well over a decade ago. So again, thank you for the committee, but please consider the issue of equity and making these old retirees whole. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Fred. Next up, we have Laura Sanders. Laura, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I retired in 2014, so I'm one of the younger retirees, but I still feel the lack of having a uniform COLA. I've been involved in working and drawing attention to this issue for the last 2 occasions, and I thank the legislators that enacted the ad hoc COLAs, but I'd really like to see myself out of work and have permanent COLAs built into the system. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laura. Next is Gretchen Mcdevitt. Gretchen, good to have you. Go ahead when you're ready. Gretchen, you still have to click unmute on your end if you're there.
Okay, I thought I did. Thank you. Anyway, I did send a letter to the pension board a while ago, so hopefully everybody saw that. As I mentioned, I retired in 2005 with a salary of $32,049 per month. I now receive $34,000, a 7% increase. Whereas if I had gotten the cost of living increase based on the consumer price index, I would be getting $42,000 now, $4,200 a month, excuse me, and which is $1,000 more a month than my $3,400 a month. I think I said that wrong. So like the idea of maintaining purchasing power. I also want to mention that Plan 1, we were limited to 30 years. Plan 2 now can retire with 50 years of service, and then they would receive 100% pay. So we are limited to 30 years. The uniform COLA, what did not keep pace with inflation, it was not as high as it being based on the consumer price index. So I'm really not interested. I hope we don't go to uniform COLA. I'd like something that's equitable and keeps pace as best as possible with inflation. Most of the pension plans that get the cost of living increase are limited to 3%. I believe there is a law enforcement one that is not limited. So if inflation went up to 5%, I think they would get 5%, but I'm not 100% certain on that. Even now, people on minimum wage get a COLA. You know, the cost of the minimum wage goes up each year with inflation somewhat. So we just want a permanent fix, please. It's such a waste of everybody's time. The legislature, the pension board, everybody works on this year after year, and we need to come up with a satisfactory solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gretchen. Next is Patricia Mcgowan. Patricia, go ahead. And Patricia, don't forget to, yeah, there you go.
Sorry, I finally unmuted. Yes, Patricia Mcgowan. I'm a volunteer with WSSRA and with the University of Washington Retirement Association. I've, like many others you've heard today, been working on this COLA issue for years, coming down to Olympia, and appreciate the legislators that have supported us very much. But it is so frustrating, as you can hear, that we just come every year working on the same problem, an equitable COLA for PERS 1 members. And we really want you to recommend something to help us solve this long-term problem. And we're really appreciate the opportunity to testify on this and the need for it. It is an equity issue. It's not right. People are right. It's 60% of the retirees that don't have a COLA are women. And it's the lowest paid, oldest members of the state pension system. So let's work on this. Let's get this done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patricia. Next up is Daniel Gray. Daniel, go ahead.
Yes, hi, thank you. I'm a Peers 2 person, so I wanted to say that although I won't personally be benefited directly by this discussion, and I strongly support equitable COLA for Peers 1. And part of that is the reason I went into public service in the beginning, and I served in the military, and I actually served in the state of Utah in public service before we moved to Washington and decided 22 years ago, this is the best place and we wanted to stay here. But public service was to strengthen the community we lived in. And that's what all of us as public servants, including yourselves, are doing. And so when I see that there's vulnerable people in the community, I feel like that's still public service to try to help them. And our retirees that are in Peers 1 are more vulnerable. So I just want to continue my advocacy for those vulnerable by asking that you'll look for an equitable COLA for them. And I might add that investing in our most vulnerable really strengthens the entire community. I happen to be a clergy member now in my retired years and in University Place, South Tacoma, Washington. And I see the homeless problem around me all the time, daily. I see people needing help with food and medicine, and in some extent the church can do that and can help. But I believe that our society is strong enough that we can help those that do need the help. And I'd like to be part of that solution by helping our seniors to get the COLA that they deserve. And thank you for your service also.
Thank you, Daniel. Perhaps last, it's at least the only one left with a hand raised, is Mary Lindsay. And anybody else who's sitting in the audience hoping to testify, raise your hand real quick. Otherwise, Mary is going to be our last one. So Mary, go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Mary Lindsay, and from the Washington Education Association. I'm the president, and I'm speaking on behalf of my membership. And I personally retired in 2007, and I've only received 2 COLAs in 2018 and 2020. So that's 11 years without a COLA consecutively. I know that there are members of WEA retired that are also in the PERS 1 program, and certainly we support PERS and TERS equally. It seems totally unfair that PERS 1 and TERS 1 are the only retirement plans in the state that do not have an automatic COLA. We generally feel left out, and we also feel like we're a broken record, and we're old enough to have personal experience with broken records, and they've never sounded that good. The McCleary decision went on, or the News lawsuit went on for a number of years about the state's obligation to fund education. And after that, the McCleary decision, there was a salary adjustment for staff. Well, we retirees in TERS 1 never received any salary adjustment at all. And so money that we spend, since we are older, is supports our community. And so that's very important. And I, along with other speakers, I believe that this is a women's issue too, because there are a lot of most in the education field is about 75% women. So it's just comes down to a fairness issue, and it comes down to there's a lot of problems in the world. So if we could solve this one, we could get it off the docket. So thank you for your time, and I do appreciate those people that have been working on it for years and years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary. We did have one other individual raise their hand. Gloria Smith, good timing. Go ahead when you're ready, Gloria.
Hi, my name is Gloria Smith, and I am also with WEA Retired. And I have been lobbying for years about the COLA since before I was retired, because of course I knew it was going to be a problem. And before that, we lobbied all the time for salary increases, and many years, even during good times, let's say the 90s, there were no salary increases. And, that was patently unfair. And to not give COLAs for our retirees is also patently unfair. I also wanted to point out, I know one person already kind of brought this up, but in Clark County, because I'm in Vancouver, Washington, one of our biggest groups that are entering homelessness at this time is seniors. I don't know of any teachers or even PERS 1 people right now that are homeless, but for people to have worked all their life, and especially as public servants, teachers, and other employees of the state, I think it's disgraceful that the seniors in our community are the number one group that's rising in homelessness right now. So I would like to see a permanent COLA. And then, we can all celebrate that we're not dealing with this issue year after year after year. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. I do not see any other hands raised. So we'll close public comment period. Before we adjourn, two quick items. One is just after I told Melinda she was off the hook, I did get a question emailed to me from Anthony Murrieta. So Melinda, are you still there and able to answer a question that Anthony had about your presentation?
I'm still here. Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, sorry about that. Anthony emailed the question. I appreciate all of the examples of the economic impact to the fund in dollars. What is the impact to the overall health of the fund when or if a COLA is implemented? And does it hurt the viability of the overall fund or enough to cause the funds to be in trouble?
That's a good question. I think that would probably be a question that might require some additional details, right? The magnitude of an increase, and I would probably lean on my actuarial experts, Michael Harbour, but it would definitely impact the rolling 10-year amortization period and paying off the UAAL.
Yeah, thanks for queuing me up, Melinda. For the record, Michael Harbour, actuary for OSA. And the Plan 1 benefit improvements in statute, they are required to be paid off over a fixed 10-year period. And there's actually a separate contribution rate that is charged specifically for that purpose. So that hopefully that answers one part of the question. Additionally, essentially when you're providing a new benefit, you're adding more promises to the pool there. So if there were to be really significant downturns in the market or things like that, you've increased overall obligations to the plan, and that could increase risk. So I certainly can't quantify that without a specific example, but down the road, if the committee has specific proposals they want to look at, we can also do some risk analysis to provide some more context there.
Okay, thanks, Michael. That does it for everything. I did have two questions for Aaron. One is, I don't think we ever got a quorum as I'm parsing through this list.
That's correct. We're very close, but not quite.
Okay, so we will defer approving the June minutes until our next meeting, which, reminder to those on the committee and those viewing from home, There is not, as our standard practice, there is not an August meeting, so the next meeting of this committee will be in September. So we'll approve the June and July minutes in September, assuming a quorum is present. And then also, Aaron, given that the executive committee was scheduled to gavel in 13 minutes ago, what is the standard practice for when these meetings run past when the exec committee is supposed to start?
It's chair's discretion for how much you'd like to take. Typically, we would just bump things forward by a half hour. So if you wanted to give the 20 to 30 minute break and then start at say 12:55, perfectly all right. Again, you have some discretion there if you'd like to move that in one direction or the other.
Okay, that works for me. So the executive committee will begin at 12:55. And thanks to everyone for sticking around, both on the committee and those watching from home and those who came to share their comments and concerns with the committee. Appreciate everybody, and apologies for the meeting going late, but hopefully it was a productive session. So with that, I will adjourn the meeting and see the executive committee in 31 minutes.
Recording stopped.